June 10th. See, it's flying by. The June 10th meeting of the Saugus Board of Health. This was a reschedule from the first week of June. We usually do the meetings on the first Monday of the month. The first order of business, I would like to make a motion for the board to accept the minutes from the executive session from our May 6th meeting. I know you've all had a chance to review them. Second from Anthony, all in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. 5-0. Accept those minutes. Okay, second order of business, we're gonna review, everybody have time to review the minutes from the open meeting, general meeting, from the May 6th meeting of the Saugus Board of Health. I have reviewed them as well. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as written. If anybody has no corrections?
No corrections.
Okay, and we had a second from Mr. Durant. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So we've accepted those two new orders of business. And second order, I guess. I am delighted to welcome Sean Dunn from the Mass DPA. He is going to be giving us a presentation on the DPA air quality monitoring. It's going to give us a presentation.
He's from DEP.
Pardon me?
He's from DEP.
What did I?
Environmental Protection.
DPA, Department.
DEP. Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. DEP. Sean reached out to me, and the timing was impeccable because we were a couple meetings ago. We had hired a private company that unfortunately wasn't really what we thought it was. So when we were kind of figuring out what the next steps were, Mr. Dunn reached out to me and informed us that we had qualified for the air quality monitoring through Mass DEP. So Mr. Dunn and I met, and then I gave it to the board, and the board and I and Mr. Freilich had decided that in the best interest of the community, we would ask Mr. Dunn to come out and explain the program to all of us at a meeting. So it is my distinct pleasure, and we are all very delighted to have this presentation and hopefully get this program underway. So, without any other babbling on my part, Mr. Sean Dunn.
Thank you very much. So really all I'm going to present is this figure here to kind of show a little bit of the area that we were looking at initially. What we're proposing to do and what we have funding to do is to set up a permanent air monitoring station in the Saugus area. And this is directly related to comments that were given on our air monitoring network plan in 2023. So every year we present a air monitoring network plan for the year. We post it for public comment. We received multiple comments about a facility here in Saugus, the wind waste facility, and the need for air monitoring in the area due to that facility. And so we had some funding from EPA, and we decided to use that funding to put an air monitoring station that will monitor fine particulates, which are the PM 2.5, and then the coarser particulates, the PM 10, as well as black carbon, which is an indicator of primarily diesel smoke in an area like this. It can also measure wood smoke, but that would be more for a more rural area. There are some restrictions on where it can go, but it is a fairly easy to site kind of thing because it is a smaller type monitoring station. It's about twice the size of this podium probably, and it does require electricity, and there are some EPA requirements that we have to meet as far as siting criteria goes. It's going to be a certain distance away from roadways and a certain distance away from trees. So with that in mind, you know, we can't necessarily put it just anywhere we want, but we can usually find a place that suits our needs. We typically try to find a public space to put it on because we don't pay rent, and we want it to be someplace where it's going to be able to be out there for a long, long time without concerns about redevelopment or something like that. So with those sort of parameters in mind, we did take a look at some areas around the wind waste facility to see, you know, what might work. And I have some locations marked out as A, B, C, D, and E, and that's not in any real particular order. It was just to try and identify some areas on this map. When we were doing this, myself and Allison Langoni, who's here as well from our office, we looked at some air direction, wind speed, wind direction data ourselves, and then we spoke to some modeling people in our group about, you know, which way the predominant wind is blowing. The work that we did show a predominant wind direction that sort of goes to the east or southeast, but there are variations to that throughout the year. In the springtime, I believe the wind goes sort of upriver there a little bit towards the west or northwest. Through the summer months, it sort of stays there, and then in the fall, winter, and early springtime is blowing out toward the water. Our modeling people indicated that the area of most significant impact is probably in that Point of Pines area to the south east, which is technically, I think that's Revere. But that wouldn't necessarily mean that there aren't impacts anywhere else. So we wanted to look at other areas as well. And what we really want to know is what's important to the people in Saugus here. That's where the facility is, and you know, if the people in Saugus think that this monitor should be in Saugus, that's important to us. So we also looked at some areas on the Saugus side of the wind waste facility, and just for orientation, the wind waste facility is up here where 107 and right about where that river is converge. And so there is a DCR walkway just to the east of that, or I'm sorry, just to the west, where that A signifies a location. There's a parking lot there for a DCR walkway. That's pretty close to the wind waste facility, the closest to the wind waste facility. And we could talk to DCR and try to work something out with them. That B, the letter B, signifies an area on the same walkway, but further down over by, I think there's an Italian-American club over there. There's an entrance to the walkway down there that we could also look at. It's also pretty close to the wind waste facility, but just a different location. The letter C is there's a park over in that Point of Pines area that is a possible location. There's not a lot of spots in there that would really be ideal. And it is a park, playground area. So obviously that space, limited space, is valuable for the playground. Letter D is an area in Lynn that is a little wharf area that is also sort of nearby, but is in Lynn. And then I looked at another area. There's a playground and baseball field up northwest of the facility that also might work. And there's plenty of other spaces I'm sure that would work. These are just the ones that we sort of looked at and thought about as potential locations. So in general, the closer you're getting to the facility, the more you're sort of measuring the impact of that facility. The closer you're getting to a roadway, the more you're measuring the impact of that roadway. The closer you're getting to residences, the more you're sort of measuring what residents are exposed to. You know, when we're thinking about what's our goal here, you know, there's it impacts sort of where we would want to put this this monitor. You know, is it really important to us that it is close to the facility, or is it really important to us that it's near the residents, where the residents live, so that we're measuring sort of what they're impacted by. So that's partly why we're here, is to try and understand what's important to the people that are most impacted by this facility. Does anybody have any questions for me? Hi.
Hi, I am Jackie Parks-Macario. I grew up in that area for over 40 years, and a lot of my family still lives there. I know that we have spoken, Sean.
Sure.
But I wanted to follow up one of your comments about how this opportunity came to Saugus because of like some of the studies that were done by Olin College. We did see a spike over at C, which is on the Pointer Pines, Gibson Park area. If we were to put it back there and still got the spikes that we've seen previously in other studies, would that be an advantage to us to know, like, would it tip off EPA to any further studies to bring it into Saugus then, or do we just do Saugus and see what happens? What would be the advantages?
Sure, that's a great question. So, you know, the idea behind this monitor is hopefully to put it in one place and not have to move it. So we want to find an ideal location for it. Now, it just because there's an expense to like setting up electricity and you know, the time it takes to get everybody to agree on a place to put it is lengthy. But the advantage to putting it in that Pointer Pines area, I think, would be that is sort of in that area of predicted highest impact. The disadvantage is it's not a huge, a residential area down there. Once you get past the that Gibson Park, it's not far before you're just into the water, and the fish don't really care what's in the air. The idea that you'd be getting the most highest impacted area, you know, would give you, I guess, that sense of, all right, here's the area of highest impact, and this is the level that is most impacted by this facility. And if we're expecting, residents to the west to be impacted at a lower level, and that provides some level of safety, feeling of safety, then that's an advantage, I guess. If it's not as high as, you know, we only have our standards that the EPA gives us to really go by in all of this as well. So, you know, if it's below that threshold, then you could feel fairly certain that the areas in Saugus would be below that threshold as well. Go ahead.
Oh, Sean, first of all, thank you for you and Allison coming this evening. Really appreciate it. Taking time to give this presentation. The question I have, first of all, being from Saugus, we hear most of the complaints from Saugus and that large neighborhood to the west of Saugus. The question that I have is, as far as modeling, as far as stack height and transport and everything else, does A still present, is that still a good position in your mind for the monitor, number one? Number two, you said you asked people as far as modeling and as far as wind direction and everything else. When would be the ideal time for the west wind flow in that direction?
Sure. So, I'm not a modeling expert by any stretch, but we did talk to our modeling folks. And yes, there is, so the biggest driver of that, impact analysis is wind direction. So the wind carries pollution in whatever direction the wind is blowing. And it's just the predominant direction is into that easterly, southeasterly sort of direction. And so that's where you're expecting to get that highest impact. But like we said, it does vary from season to season. There are times where it is the predominant wind direction is up towards like those locations A and B. So, you know, it's not like 100% of the time, you know, that the wind is flowing to that area of highest impact. It's just the most common area. So, you know, you're still going to see impacts wherever you put the monitor. It's just a matter of, is it going to be the area that is, you know, expected to see the highest impacts or not? And I think the seasonal, and Allison, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, I think seasonally, the time of year that the wind is flowing to the west, I think that's like late spring and summer. Does that sound right?
It sounds right.
And we can certainly look this up and send you some more information. But we have some wind roses that we've looked at. We collected information from Logan Airport and we have a monitoring station up in Lynn, which is not too far, terribly far. This location's about right in the middle between Logan Airport and and our Lynn site. And they both, you know, they don't match up exactly, but they both kind of told similar stories.
The Logan data is much more variable, given it's much closer to the water, and our wind site is more inland. And there is seasonal variation.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions. So Sean, I just have to echo the board's sentiment and the residents' sentiment. Thank you so much for being here. Your timing with this grant is impeccable, to say the least. So we've been looking over the last couple of months for some similar monitoring services, and unfortunately they kind of came with some price points that were just kind of outlandish. So at this point, again, being able to partner with the DEP on some, on some monitoring of this scale. I know we spoke briefly a little bit about it, but there has been some scrutiny, obviously, around the location of where we're talking about putting this stuff. It's obviously historically the Precinct 10 has been one of the more heavily affected, precincts due to the wind waste facility. But one of my questions that I have is, and again, we spoke briefly about it a couple of weeks ago as we were, putting this in motion, is what would the difference be between the purple air monitors that are currently in place versus what you propose to set up along Eastern Avenue?
Sure, it's a great question. The purple airs are wonderful devices. I should have brought one. It's killing me that I didn't bring one, but they are small little devices that measure the fine particulates, the PM 2.5 pollutants. They are consumer grade instruments that anybody can go on their website and buy one and set it up at their house and see what their local air quality is like, which is what makes them really great. They're easy to use and they are easy to set up, and you can go on their website and collect the data really easily. But they're not regulatory grade instruments. They're just not made for making regulatory decisions. The ones that we'll be putting in are made for regulatory decisions. They will be, the data gets collected and compared to EPA's health-based standards and is submitted to EPA. And if we're meeting their health-based standards, then we're considered an attainment. If we're not meeting that standard, then the state is required to take action at that point. So it is a monitor that's approved by the EPA to be used for this type of monitoring. It is much more expensive, and it requires more attention. We would set this site up and then on a regular basis have a person come out and do the regular maintenance, calibrations that are required to make this data usable for that purpose. And then the data comes in, we review it all before it gets sent to the EPA, and then we make that submittal to the EPA, and then it's available for public consumption. It's also posted publicly on our Mass Air online website in real time, so that anybody can go on there on whatever particular day and see, is my air quality good, moderate, bad.
What exactly is your monitor, or this monitor you're talking about, monitor? Because the way I understand it, the purple thing kind of doesn't differentiate between water vapor and harmful particles. I mean, is yours, I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah. So
That's
exactly.
what we're looking at?
It's a different sensor. It's the purple airs are a fairly cheap little sensor
Yeah, I
that they
understand.
put in.
What does yours,
It has a heater column in it that
what does it tell us? What does
the
it
same pollutant. It measures PM fine.
itemizes pollutant, itemizes or differentiates what it's seeing?
It uses a different method for measuring that pollutant.
Does it just, it identifies particular pollutants or just particles? It just says this crack in the air.
So
We don't know whether that's-
yeah. So it will differentiate between the fine particles, the PM 2.5, and the coarser particles, the PM 10.
Does it identify them?
Yes, separately. Yes,
Not by size, by what they are.
by concentration. Yeah.
Oh, do they identify them? Do they say what the particle is?
So what's in the part, like the chemical composition,
Yeah,
is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Gotcha. It does not.
So how does it help us?
Well, it'll tell you that there's, there are the health-based standards for those particles. And so you'll get some information on if the particles themselves are above or below that standard that the EPA set.
but you still don't know what the particle is.
What's it composed of?
Exactly.
Correct.
So is that helpful information, not knowing what it is?
It is helpful, even if you don't have that other component. Obviously, more information, would be, I think, helpful. And that's maybe something we can work on in the future.
See, I was stunned to find out that the other thing, and I know it's not in the same classes that you have, it could be overwhelmed by water vapor. I mean, if your thing is not telling us what it is, I mean, I love water vapor, but we have to know what the particles are, whether they're harmful, whether they're just pollen. I mean, I don't understand.
It wouldn't be a pollen particle. No, it would be a...
Well, we have a certain culprit we're blaming for everything. We have to identify that where the stuff is coming from. It could have nothing to do with them, it could be totally them. I mean, if you can't identify the particles, where do we go? I'm not sure if that's stupid or what. I mean,
No, it's not a stupid question. I think I understand what you're saying. This isn't going to solve every problem. I think it's information that is valuable for the community. Again, it does have, a health-based standard, which is not there for the chemical speciated data that you could get for one of these particles that tells you it's got, lead or carbon or whatever else is in it.
It will not tell us that.
It will not tell us that. But that information on its own doesn't necessarily help you anymore. Well, I mean, it's good information to have, and I'm not trying to tell you that you don't need it or anything like that. This has an EPA hard standard associated with it.
Of just particles.
Just the
It could be
particle.
particles of anything.
Yeah.
There's no
so
difference between sand, I know not sand, but a naturally occurring particle and
Right.
a
So this,
carcinogenic particle.
yeah. So the EPA is not putting a standard on the composition of the particle. They put the standard on the particle itself in that
Number of
size.
And that's important information, I assume?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Is
So
what differentiates what gets into your bloodstream and what doesn't.
But it doesn't, it identifies that something's getting in, but we don't know what it is. We can't identify the particles.
So, but there are, they've developed the standard based on studies of health impacts, just based on size and not composition.
Really?
Yes.
That's my question.
Okay.
Are we getting useful information?
Yes, you are. Yep.
So I had a follow-up question to that. So now you mentioned that this is all regulatory grade. And so that was kind of one of the buzzwords that I picked up on from, from our conversations, just due to the fact that obviously there's been a lot of scrutiny as far as what data we're getting from these purple air monitors. Now what you're saying is that it's basically just a cheap Home Depot version of what you're talking about, correct?
So it's good information. I don't want to make the.
And what I mean by that is, so now, because we're going to have this regulatory piece of equipment that's going to be down, bordering precinct 10, I would assume that any type of exceedance that gets submitted to the EPA. Now you mentioned that there's going to be some sort. I don't know what the next steps are from an enforcement standpoint. Now you mentioned that the DEP would be forced to take action should the EPA see that there's an exceedance. And I'm just curious to know what that looks like as far as what we can expect from now, would it just be, would it be directed more towards the wind waste facility, or would it be more directed towards the town of Saugus?
So it's a really great question, and I wish I had an answer for you. We don't get involved in those plans.
Okay.
We just collect the
my own
measurements.
information.
Yeah. No, it's a really great question, and this is something that Allison and I struggle with a lot, because when we're talking to people, that's what you care about, right? Like,
Sure.
What's going to happen?
Sure.
And we unfortunately don't get involved in that. I can tell you, it is a long process to get actionable data, so the attainment level is based on a 3-year data set.
Okay, I was going to say, it's not just like it's going to pop and be like, okay, yeah, you're in violation of something.
Right,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
They also the EPA did just lower the threshold for the PM 2.5 particles. The annual average went from a 12 micrograms per cubic meter level to a 9 micrograms per cubic meter level, which is a pretty steep drop. The EPA decided, based on the recommendations of the scientific community, to lower the standard to provide a higher level of protection. So their understanding is that it's more protective of people's health. Not that necessarily individuals are getting sick, but through whatever studies were presented to them, this would be a more protective level. And it's sort of common sense stuff too, that 0 would be the most protective. But in general, the EPA standards start out higher and are lowered over time.
So are you aware of any studies that have looked at what these particles are mostly consistent of, made up of? Like PM125, those are usually like lead or usually carbon or usually something. Are there any studies that have, dissected them or looked at them?
Sure. So we do collect some samples for speciation of the chemical speciation of the particle to show what it is. We have one in Boston, and it will give you the percentage of carbon and metals and sulfates and nitrates.
So there is some sort of a general knowledge of what it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they just put a thing on it. PM125 is mostly
size.
made up of.
The size.
It's the size, yeah. And those could contain X, Y, and Z.
So the samples that we collect, it tells you
Collected.
what's in there.
Yeah, it's what's in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Could you talk about
sorry.
some of the data that's collected, how often you submit it into EPA, and what the average time would be?
Sure. So, great question. So we collect the data continuously. This the device that we're proposing to install here collects minute by minute a concentration, and that concentration gets rolled up into hourly averages, and those are that's how it gets submitted to the EPA in these hourly averages, and the data goes through, like I said, a long process of review internally, and so 90 days from the end of a quarter is when we're required to get it submitted to the EPA. So the data from January, February, March is we have to have it into the EPA by the end of June. Does that make sense?
I believe this gentleman here had a question.
Yes.
Thank you. Just a question on the location. I heard you say that ideally it's to be located in one spot, but like I think of the highway trucks, they have the trailer with the arrow pointing. Is this something, because you said it was about 2 of those, is this something you can put on a trailer and be able to move to different locations for, say, a quarter at a time or 6 months at a time and get different readings around town?
So it's a great question, and you can do that kind of thing. You won't be able to compare it to the EPA standards if you're moving it around, and that's where it gets a little difficult. But it's a great use of those devices, the purple airs. You can get 5 or 10 of those purple airs and put them at different locations around town. Because they're cheap and comparable to each other, you can get those and put them around different areas and see where are we seeing higher levels than than others. Which is, and you can put one next to the regulatory monitor and see how it compares to that. So you kind of know, like, all right, if the purple air, which is not a regulatory device, is 1 or 2 micrograms per cubic meter higher on average than the regulatory monitor, then you kind of can take that into account as well, and really develop an idea of a map of your community and You know, where are we seeing the highest levels? Is it right next to the wind waste facility, or is it right next to Route 1, or just a busy intersection or something?
What's the minimum on the time period the EPA would consider that data as, you know, useful to them to make some sort of adjustment? And then also my other question would be, there's a park on Bristol that has a huge power generator
Okay.
right at the playground. If you look where B is, directly up B where that first green patch is, closer to Lincoln, was that a location that you guys checked by any chance?
I haven't been there, but I will go check it out.
Yeah, there's a huge transformer right there. Could be another location because that's
Sure.
kind of smack dab right in the middle.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Precinct.
Yeah. It's great.
I have a question regarding the location. So you're saying that the most advantageous area would be C and Point I because of the way the wind? That's in Revere. Would Revere be eligible for their own monitor there so we can focus strictly in Saugus and the impact on the Saugus residents and the community there?
That was my question.
So, you know, anybody's eligible. I don't want to say that we would definitely put one out there in the future, but if we get money and that's an area of interest, there definitely could be a situation where that would happen. Having a monitor in Saugus does not preclude us, doesn't eliminate Point of Pines from getting one at all.
So how many grants do you have? Just
Right now, we have funding for the one site, yeah.
And my question, how long is this good for? You mentioned 3 years is when they're gonna collecting the data.
So that's just to compare to the EPA standard.
Okay.
But we're putting this out there with the hope that it'll just be out there in perpetuity until, you know, we occasionally get kicked out or, you know.
Yeah. But you're funded for.
But yeah, once the monitor's out there, the biggest expense is the labor for going out and doing the maintenance on it. And for us, it's a fairly light lift just because it's neat. We're in Lawrence,
Right.
so it's easy for us to get out there.
So it can be maintained for infinite.
Yeah.
Nice. Does anybody else have any questions from the
I
board?
have one more.
You have one more?
Madam
Okay,
Chair.
John.
So, now it sounds as though, you know, the sentiments are going to be that we're obviously not going to want to, you know, if you only have funding for one, you know, it's obvious that we're going to be looking to put it someplace at a location in Saugus. Now, as far as these locations are concerned, were these just the first locations that you kind of came up with based off of some modeling data? Or is there going to be some type of public comment period or what have you as far as where the next steps are?
Absolutely. We kind of looked around at what might be possible and tried to look at what was nearby, but we're very open to you know, what you need. We're here to really understand what, you know, this community wants to get out of this, because you're driving the bus on it. So
Okay, cool.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, as far as the, you know, the next steps, now as far as putting equipment in the ground and having it ready, so what does the time frame look like as far as the setup is concerned?
Sure.
As far as an implementation would be
Yeah,
concerned?
that's a great question. You know, it is a long process, unfortunately, but mostly for getting the whatever agreement on the location. So if we had to get an agreement from DCR or, you know, some other organization, then there's a process for getting electricity set up and state procurement process. Maybe the city's procurement process is similar, but it can be difficult. But, you know, like on the 6 month to if it was a really difficult one, maybe a year time frame, we've set these up. We got one up in Chelsea, a very similar situation. We got one up in Chelsea in like 4 months, and that was, we just happened to have really good luck and a really engaged community as well. That goes a long way. If the community is not interested in it, then it gets really difficult. But the more help we get from the community, the
I would imagine that we would want to have it as close to the calendar year as possible, just so we can kind of start on a brand new year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we were to be rolling it out within 6 months from now, would you be able to provide us with kind of a list of protocols as to what we need to do as a town in order to kind of roll this out?
So for us, the biggest thing right now is sort of agreeing on
Finding
a
a spot.
location, like that's the biggest thing. Once that's done, we could start on our end ordering and getting the procurement on electrician going and,
Okay, sounds good.
That sounds really good.
Great, great.
It's just a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely,
For us.
absolutely.
So,
great,
thank
yeah,
you.
I'm glad to hear it.
And I do think we will have a lot of community.
We'll certainly,
Input on
we'll
that.
certainly have some community engagement as far as
Absolutely.
this is concerned, I would imagine.
I agree that it's an awesome opportunity, and so far we have like a bunch of purple monitors up in the area that have been going for almost a year.
Yeah.
And I think someone could go and take the data and take a look at where the hotspots are.
Mhm.
But there are definitely a bunch.
And I'd be very interested to see, you mentioned that, maybe the purple air monitors, just because they're not calibrated as frequently as regulatory grade stuff. I'd be very interested to see what the disparities are as far as
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, is it really just barely off, or is it something that is just so crazily off that it's like, wow?
It's not so crazy,
Okay.
and Allison could probably talk a little bit about it more than I could. She knows these purple air monitors backwards and forwards, and she knows a lot about air monitoring all around. But I think this is an area of particular expertise. Is it fair to say that the purple airs are typically like 2 micrograms, like at low levels, especially when we get into the higher levels, when you see like wildfire smoke impacts and show like a day like today, you're probably around like maybe 8 to 10 micrograms per meter cubed. During a wildfire event, you might see 35, 40, 50. At those levels, the disparity becomes much bigger. At the lower levels, it's not quite as much. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a pretty fair assessment, and what I would say is the trend, if you look at a graph, a time series graph of our regulatory data with the purple air monitor, the trend is, if the purple air monitor is functioning properly, the trend is like spot on. You see the regulatory monitor spike, you see the purple air spike. It's just the scale of it that's off, which makes it hard to compare to any sort of health-based standards, but it's very good at detecting something that's nearby it. I have one, and I have a grill, and you use the grill, it goes up. So it's really good at detecting sources, but with like anything, like these monitors, they're detecting the air right where they're monitoring. So that's kind of another thing that you want to be aware of. We can extrapolate with modeling, and we do have a team of modelers, but purple air is measuring right where it's at. So if you have an idling truck near it, and we see this, we see this at our regulatory stations in Kenmore Square a lot. You see random spikes at random times of the day. Could be something idling, could be weed whacking, things like that. So it's going to pick those things up. But back to the purple air versus the regulatory monitor, the trend is really good. And the thing about purple airs too is if you compare a purple air to a purple air, you're comparing the same thing. So the number is not so important as to comparing, like, is this one higher consistently? Is it consistently higher at this time of day? Or, does the trend match with other sensors around? So that's kind of the utility of a purple air in your context where you're concerned about certain areas. In a more general sense, purple airs are really good. You put a ton of them out. If you zoom out on the purple air map, and you can track wildfire smoke going through it. So you can see if the smoke's still in my area just by zooming out and just having a ton of them. So I hope that answers your question about the purple air data. The data isn't useless. It's just
not
you
useful.
can't compare it to
So,
health standards.
I have a question, like when you see like a spike in the purple air, yeah, that's my question, is that something to be concerned about? Or when you say trends, is it more like if it's trending high, like if it's staying high for long periods of time? If you have a quick spike, say, it spikes up and it goes right back down to the low trending?
So that's a really common thing to happen, and it's a great question.
Thank
You
you.
know, we're looking at long-term exposure,
Okay.
especially when it comes to particulates.
Okay,
You know, the short-term exposure, it does happen. I mean, you know,
yeah. So a
like
spike
she
would
said,
be
go
short-term,
next to a barbecue,
right.
and they're gonna get a spike. And who among us hasn't
You want to know
had a
what,
delicious barbecue before and gotten exposed to a little bit of a short-term, you know, spike.
okay, okay.
But
That's good,
When
that's
you're looking
nice
at-
information
yeah.
to know, because when I look online and I see, you know, it goes up, it comes right
Something
back
like
down
that.
to what,
Yeah.
say,
Yeah,
a
that
normal.
one.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's what I, thank you.
Which site are you on?
That, I don't know, but that's what we
This is
see.
at Lobsterman's Landing.
Lobsterman's Landing, that
So
was the one
would
we.
be- That would be basically right around A.
A,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the one, Sean, you and I talked
That's
about,
on,
that
that's,
seems to have a lot of
May
the
30th.
quick
It
sites.
looks like it's
Yeah, yeah.
noon
Of this year?
Yeah.
of this
Okay,
year.
yeah, so that's pretty common. We do see this, and this, so I've been to that site, sorry, just stand up. I've been to that site a couple times. I actually replaced the particle counters in that sensor because it was malfunctioning last year.
Yes.
And that you guys were seeing like those
Yes,
ridiculous.
yes,
Okay.
exactly,
Yes,
yeah,
I know, and I know that can be alarming.
it was.
Um,
yeah.
So the thing with these sensors is if like something gets in there, like a bug,
Mhm.
the sensor can't really.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, that
Exactly,
bumblebee
so-
fly into it and a
Exactly,
bird knock it
so
over. like, I
spiders
mean,
love them,
yeah.
I mean, dirt, particles,
Okay.
everything like that, so
Thank you. for
that's
that.
what happened last year. I replaced that in about October of
Mhm.
2023 is when I fixed it. And so, the great thing about Purple Air's, good thing about Purple Airs is that they have two particle counters. So when you see spikes like that, if you see both of the channels, it's kind of a quality control check on itself. Because there was some bugs with the particle counters. But if you see both of those channels spiking up, you can be more confident that there was something that spiked it because both particle counters picked it up. In the case of that malfunctioning sensor, only one was picking it up and one was getting stuck. So in this case, it looks like both of the
It
channels are
looks like both,
spiking.
right.
So at that site too, it's a boat dock. You do have diesel boats that are, I mean, I've been there and I was kind of having trouble breathing from like boats and things that are there. There are trucks that are idling there a lot. And those things, they're not insignificant, but it's just, like, it just is the data, if that makes sense. Like there was something, there could have been something. It's hard to say what it was.
But it's gone. It's there and it's gone.
Exactly,
It
right.
wasn't
And so-
sustained
Whether or
for a
Wasn't
long
sustained.
It's really whether or not it's
Exactly.
affecting on a grand whole.
Okay,
Exactly.
but that, it's, like you say, it's good to know.
Yeah, and so the EPA standards are for longer periods of time. So the smallest grain that you can get for like an exceedance is a 24-hour standard. And even then, I don't know if there's any sort of action that comes from exceedances of the 24-hour standard.
So there's a little difference between an exceedance and a violation of the standard. An exceedance would indicate that something was going on that day. A violation of the standard is based on the calculation of the 3-year design value that
So
is a little more
that
convoluted.
kind of leads me to another question, I'm sorry.
No.
So-
Hey, it's good.
Fantastic.
So is it sort of like an average then, when they look at these, say, quick spikes, would they be adding up like you do, like, say, to get your grade in school? Would you, your average is, say, an 80 because of how they average your grade. When they look at these spikes over the day or the year or the 3 years, do they add, you get certain points for like quick spikes as opposed to sustained spikes?
So Sean mentioned that the monitor measured, I guess I'm going to talk about a regulatory monitor.
Right.
Average, it takes a data point every single minute. And
Yep.
then we average together each one of those minutes into
Okay.
an hourly average. So, if there's a lot of spikes or if it's elevated for a long period of time,
That gets factored
that
in.
will reflect
Okay.
in
That
the
would be the
hourly
data.
average.
Okay. I did hear that, I'm sorry. Now I just got kind of,
Yeah, so, we submit hourly data to the EPA, and then the EPA takes that and roll it up into 24-hour averages, and then from there, there's a standard for a 24-hour day.
Right.
That standard is 35 micrograms. That was not adjusted or changed. EPA stood by their 24-hour average of saying that over 35 micrograms, it starts to become bad, unhealthy for sensitive groups. it starts to become unhealthy once you get over that standard. But that's a 24-hour average. It's not 2 minutes, it's not 1 hour. That's the.
You might be surprised too at how quickly those spikes wash out in a 24-hour average. It
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
you know, most of our 24-hour averages look pretty similar. You don't see a lot of big spikes. The only thing that really moves the 24-hour averages a ton, in our experience, are those Canadian wildfires or
Okay.
wildfire smoke
Makes
from
sense.
western
It's so
U.S.
sustained.
Yes.
The one thing that keeps coming back to my head, and I know this is when there was so many issues with lead in the gas, and the children that lived under the Tobin, and they had such high lead levels, and they were able to monitor that in the dirt and in the air, and that's when they were able to make a good case for removing lead from the gas. I don't know why that just keeps coming into my head.
Just a great example of achievement in environmental, protection is that de-leaded gasoline, and you can see, what was it, the 1978 or whatever.
And then 78 is any houses that were built after.
All the de-leaded.
Before 78.
Or the de-leaded gasoline.
De-leading gasoline and de-leading of houses was all
You
around
can see
78.
Around that time,
It's a
yeah.
public health nurse
sharp
in me.
drops in the amount of lead in the air.
Yeah. So it's all just come around now that we're just getting a little more.
And that lead standard got lower and lower.
Oh, yeah.
The EPA required lower and lower levels of lead, and they're doing the same with these particulates. Like I said, they just lowered that annual standard. It was a pretty significant difference. We expect that all of our sites will still be in compliance with that standard. Some might be pretty close, but
You said it was from 12 to 9?
it was from 12 to 9, yeah, so that's
Well,
25% drop.
is everybody okay?
Just
One
one
more
quick
question.
question. I think you said you're going to be measuring, is it 5 parameters?
So the PM 2.5, the PM 10,
10
and then black carbon.
in black carbon. Okay.
Yeah. So there is no EPA standard for the black carbon, just so you know, but it is a great indicator of like diesel pollution. Like I said, traffic areas, an area like Saugus that has, this main road that the wind waste facility is on, Route 1, lots of, I'm assuming lots of truck traffic supporting Boston, that kind of thing, would be a good indicator of where that black carbon.
Well, that leads me to think that as far as Lobsterman's Landing is concerned, we may want to think about a different location, and especially if there are, if there's no regulatory standard for black carbon, it's really just kind of an indicator of diesel exhaust. I know we were just talking about the idea that there are boats there, there are idling trucks there all the time, and that would kind of lead it to, I put it this way, I want to make the most out of this particular program, you know what I
Right.
mean? So I think that we do have a due diligence to partake in as far as finding a suitable location. So I think what we can definitely do is look to put out some type of public comment request, at which point we can, gather some information from the residents, especially in Precinct 10 and I believe in Precinct 2, that, maybe we get some more information that way.
I agree, it's just that there's so many, what needs to be
Right.
there for someone could say, yeah, I want it,
Oh, sure.
on the corner
Yeah,
of,
from an infrastructure standpoint, we need to be
Yeah.
pragmatic about it. Sure.
So that would take a little more kind of information from you all to make sure we're going to put out a public comment that we have exactly where it needs to be. We're not going to make everybody in the town happy where it goes. We have one. So I think we have to think long and hard about how we do
Agreed.
that. I would, like to make a motion that we want to go forward with this. And I would like you, Mr. Freilich, to work on this and get this up as soon
Certainly.
as running and
Oh,
possible.
certainly,
I know you feel, I echo the sentiment, so that's not, it's a non-issue.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So I think we need to reconsider a location But I think we need to make a motion. Mr. Chairman, like to make a motion on, what's that?
There's one more question.
Oh,
I just have one question.
oh, sorry. Oh, thank you.
Would a higher elevation be better than a lower elevation? Because we have like Baker Hill, which is precinct 2, but it kind of overlooks
Yeah.
precinct 10. So maybe if
So,
There's
it's a
certainly
great
some-
question.
There's certainly some research that we, yeah.
Unless it's like, like a really significant elevation difference, shouldn't be too much of a difference in the measurement. We would want to avoid valleys or like bowl type areas that, you might have air passing over them. But if you're passing uphill, the wind is still going to carry things along uphill. Whereas like when you get in those valley areas, those can be a little less mixing involved. And there might be some pretty significant elevation differences here. We can look at some maps, but
I'm just curious
Yeah.
if it was higher, would, it carry?
Would it be better? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, would it be better
was
to
better,
get a reading rather than in a neighborhood?
so, again, what the more you sort of locate the monitor in a specific area, the more you're sort of monitoring those conditions
That-
versus another condition. If your chief concern is, what am I getting exposed to? Then I would say, put it in a neighborhood that, is representative of, the community. But if your, concern is something different, then you would want to adjust accordingly, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, one more question from.
Just a quick question. To your knowledge, this piece of equipment in recent history, has there been, significant actionable measures taken against an entity because of the data from this equipment?
So, the work that we do, generally, we're not targeting a specific source.
Right.
We're looking at broader, trends and trying to represent this. Typically, we're trying to represent large parts of the state. In this situation, we're trying to represent this community a little bit more because it's important. But we're really never targeting a facility. So we haven't used it in that way before.
We're going general.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody using this kind of equipment in that way. Usually it's getting used in the way that we're using it. We're just trying to show that you're either meeting the EPA standards or not.
Either way, I definitely think it's important.
Sure.
Did you mention
Allison.
precinct 10?
Mhm.
And I'm interested in, is that the precinct where the facility is located? I'm not familiar
It's
with.
closest.
It's closest to
That's
that.
the most adjacent, yeah.
It's closest to, precinct 10 is
So,
B.
So all those streets
the A
are-
and B segment, everything to the northwest, it looks to
So
be.
precinct 10 is both A and B, or included in it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's mostly neighborhoods, it's away from the water, high traffic areas.
Thank you.
All right, this is the last chance for questions.
Really great questions. This is awesome.
Great answers.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so should make a motion that we would like to go forward with this monitoring, and we're going to work quickly and efficiently to get this going, hopefully. Okay? All, second motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And a big thank you to both of you.
Thank you so
Excellent
much.
information
Thank
and
you.
great questions. Okay,
We'll be talking quite a bit, Sean.
yeah.
You want to set up some sort of regular meeting?
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a call.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Sean and
Sean.
Allison.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you, Allison.
And you have my contact information as well. Great, okay. Next, we have wind waste operational update. Thank you for your patience. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Director Freilich, and Board of Health members. Since our last meeting on May 6th, the facility operated at approximately 71% availability, processed just over 34,000 tons, and generated just over 17,000 megawatts. The facility had 4 unscheduled downtime events totaling 30 hours and 2 scheduled maintenance events totaling 458 hours. The facility completed its cold iron outage that started the same day as our last meeting. During this outage, the facility completed significant maintenance and repairs. The facility also completed the east refuse crane replacement, which we talked about during the last meeting. We also completed a modification to our superheater safety discharge piping to vent or discharge through the roof versus through the side of the buildings, which vented directly towards the community. This was a project that we started working on after the September noise event to try and mitigate noise in the event that the safety valves do need to be or are used in discharge. Help continue to show the community our dedication and commitment to being a good neighbor. Since the last Board of Health meeting on the 6th of May, the facility has shipped 4,760 tons of ash to the Wind Waste Shrewsbury landfill. On the 21st, the Mass DEP did contact the facility regarding a smoke complaint relayed from the EPA on 5/1. Facility management and corporate air reviewed emissions data, process data, and air pollution control equipment performance. Everything was operating normally on May 1st, and there were no operational issues that would have created an observed opacity. And then last Monday, I notified the Board of Health about a downtime event and subsequent loss of the induced draft fans that led to a smoky condition at the facility for approximately 15 minutes. Necessary repairs were made and the facility was brought back online that evening. We received no complaints from that event. The facility did not have any excess emissions or radioactive loads since the last meeting.
Thank you.
Update.
And I, for one, to appreciate the texts that go out. I always try and, reply and thank you for the updates. And, we do appreciate everything that you're doing to keep us informed. Anything from the board? Yes?
Question. So this was another case of having to shut down as a result of the breaker incident?
Yeah.
And number one, how did the drag valves operate? Number two, what period of time?
It was midday, so I think I sent the text out sometime just after noon. I would say it was right around that time frame, very middle of the day. Unfortunately, but fortunately, I guess, there was obviously no noise, but that was because everything shut down, so there was no need for it. But when we did bring the plant back online, our normal startup procedure is to go through the drag valve and silencer, and that worked in automatic, functioned as designed, and then we brought the turbine back online, and everything functioned how it should.
You said there was a possibility of smoke because of the induced fan.
Yeah, so we didn't have.
Fail?
We didn't have the ability to run the fan, so we.
Because of electricity.
Well, because of electricity, not the whole plant didn't lose electricity. A portion of the plant lost electricity, preventing us. We were able to remedy the issue, and it was approximately 15 minutes. Get those induced draft fans going, so then we could continue to pull a draft and maintain negative atmosphere on the crane deck, which is where the smoky condition was being observed.
But they did fail? They were off?
They shut down, yes.
So is there a backup for that?
In this particular situation, the only real backup that we had was to run them basically in a local control, which is what we did for a period of time. So instead of running from our DCS or our control room, you can run them locally up at the drives, which we were able to do while we remedied the main issue, and then we're able to put them back in control from the DCS.
I would just think that would be an important piece of equipment that would have backup. That's my first.
Yep, that's something we're looking into is, every downtime event we have, we look at, the root cause and then ways that we can prevent it in the future. That's very important to all of us here to keep making the facility better. It's better for us, it's better for the community. So that is something we're looking at is there possible, opportunity in the future to add a second feed to what failed, from a different location, so that way we can avoid that in the future. I don't have that answer right now, but it is something we are looking at.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. We have the public health nurses report. Terry, we've all had a chance to read it, so if you just want to make a quick summary
Sure.
in light of it getting so late for you.
Yes,
No,
yes.
you can, of course, yep.
So the couple of things I just wanted to include, there was, for infectious disease for Saugus this past month, we had the 11,245 of COVID. Deaths remain the same, no new deaths, 117. We did have a new TB case, so that brings it to 4 in Saugus. Foodborne illnesses, 5, none that were originated from Saugus. We also had a case of pertussis, which is also known as whooping cough. That was an outbreak that we saw in another city. There was one case here in Saugus. The cases originated in a private school. So just to give people a little bit of an update, because they hear this, they might, panic a little. Whooping cough, we do have vaccines for it. The person that was in Saugus was fully vaccinated. So as we know, vaccines are not 100%. It is a contagious respiratory infection. So once you're infected, it takes about 10 days for the signs and symptoms to appear. And then after a week or two, symptoms really worsen and it becomes thick mucus, which accumulates in your airways, which causes this whooping type of cough. It is treated with antibiotics for 5 days. So it's very treatable. If you're having these symptoms, please, a continuous cough, especially a cough that keeps you up at night, your children, go see a doctor. So I just wanted to let people know about that. Also, so I think that's it, state programs, were made aware that they do radon testing. Everyone does a radon test when you usually buy a house. What people don't know is that it's not one and done. You should continuously test your house for radon because the rocks move, it can generate more radon. The state does give out free radon testing. If you go on the DPH website and search radon, and you can access the informational pamphlets, and then there's also a hotline that you can ask for a radon test. Or you can just call our department, we can walk you through it. Want to let people, the level of radon that the state wants to see in livable areas, it was 4, it's now 2. So that's something to think about as well. Now that the nice weather is here, please, it is really tick and mosquito season. Ticks just don't carry Lyme, they carry 20 other different infections. Rashes is not really, rashes only form on 30 to 40% of those that are bitten by ticks. So don't wait for a rash to form. Do skin checks every night. And, monitor your pets that go outside. Saugus participated in a diaper drive last month, and collectively we, over the different districts, we collected over 12,000 diapers, 70 packs of wipes. Those will go to families in need. It's significantly higher than last year. We collected over 9,000 diapers, so that was good.
Good job.
And inspection of camps was last week and this week, so that's going on. That's all.
Terry,
Yes.
can we just speak to pertussis?
Yes.
And tell everybody, newborn babies and grandparents and parents.
Yes, yes. So the infants, newborns and infants are at high risk because their airway is so small. So as soon as that mucus kind of builds up, it will block the airway and they're not able to breathe, obviously. So they are, and I think they have been recommending for years now, parents to get this vaccine, grandparents, anyone that watches a newborn or infants really should get vaccinated with this, with the whooping cough, with
Tdap.
pertussis. Yeah.
So if you're
DTaP.
having a baby or you know somebody, an aunt, if you're an aunt, an uncle, most people, any caregivers are gonna be in
Yeah.
contact
Anyone
with the
seeing
newborn
the,
baby.
yeah,
You know, it's a lot of times when you become adults, you just get the TD, tetanus diphtheria. You don't get the pertussis portion
Right.
of it. So it's important for us to, you know, the herd to be immunized against it. So think about that because it's like a 10-year period since you've gotten it, probably not since high school. So
right. It's 10 years, yeah.
Where it's around now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's think about protecting those newborns and getting
Yeah.
that Tdap shot.
Yeah, good.
Triggered my memory. Thanks.
Yes.
Okay. John, you're up. Thanks so much, Teresa.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to be exceptionally brief.
Yeah, we did have a
tonight.
chance to read your report too. I don't know how to.
So, just a couple of quick things since our last meeting. So we issued a notice of violation 467 Essex Street Plaza with the 2 restaurants that were there that are currently not connected to any grease traps.
Yeah.
So the owners of both Dumpling Garden and Stella's Pizza are working with some civil engineers and some licensed drain layer to install a 2,000-gallon grease trap on the premises. There is a new owner at Punjab Kasari on Route 1. They've been conducting some preliminary cleanings of the old spot prior to applying for their plan review for a new permit. We've got 90% of our pools open. We're waiting on a couple of our yearly permits like Holiday Inn and LA Fitness and Choice. We're just waiting for their call for scheduling. I know Terry mentioned that she's been doing the medical and immunization inspections for the camps, so we do have physical facility inspections of the camps slated for next week. And just a couple other things. So as far as the Cliftondale Square road issue that we've been hearing complaints about for quite some time now, I believe have identified kind of a primary source over there. So we did make contact with a kind of a main property manager, because once the building was split up into condos, there wasn't really an association of those condos. So we tried, we tried our best to kind of piecemeal it all together. But ultimately, the only food establishment down there is Hometown Pizza, and I mean there's a liquor store there as well. But just those 2 establishments alone, their pest control, which they are required to have, it's kind of not going to do the trick as far as what the scale of the infestation looks like. So we do have a direct contact now for the property manager that we're going to be reaching out to, who's going to be kind of our main contact person for that, and hopefully that's going to alleviate a lot of the problems we're seeing around Staff Road, Lincoln Ave, Jackson Street, just kind of that whole area. And then the only other thing is we've had some fill permits come in. One in particular we had an issue with on Western Avenue. The fill was excavated from on site, so the building itself was probably 80 years old. I mean, and the guy just kind of dug his basement out and was trying to spread it around his yard. So we kind of caught him in the act of doing that. We put a cease and desist on the property until we were able to get the fill in question tested. It was probably about 5 or 6 yards, I would say. It was a pretty decent sized pile. But we just wanted to make sure that didn't have any PCBs or other contaminants in it before we let them spread it. But we did get the report back from Vineyard Engineering, and everything looked good, so we let them spread it. And just to echo, the last thing I have is just to echo Terry's sentiment regarding ticks and Lyme disease and what have you. I implore every resident in the entire state of Massachusetts, the entire New England region, to make sure that you are using bug spray and checking yourself for ticks and what have you when you're coming in from any outdoor activity. Because again, I mean, I have found 2 on myself over the last couple of weeks, a nymph dog tick as well as an adult deer tick. So I mean, it's important to know the difference, and it's important to make sure that you're checking to, again, that you're not bringing anything in with you, whether or not you're landscaping outside, going on a hike, whatever you may be doing. Again, again, I implore everybody to just make sure they're checking, because again, on top of Lyme, you know, you get a number of other vector-borne diseases that come along with a tick bite. So just make sure we're all staying vigilant out there. But other than that, obviously, we're using deep products for mosquitoes, and make sure you're eliminating any standing water on your property, and any other type of harborage for any other type of vector that we might be talking about. So other than that, Madam Chair, that's all I have for you.
Wow, that was
I
fast.
banged it up.
Did you even breathe?
Did you take a breath?
I told you, I know, we're running a little bit late tonight, so I had to do it.
Do we have any sessions, thank you, John, any sessions, topic but not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours in advance of the meeting?
I have nothing. John does.
Anyone?
No.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, so typically we recess for the summer, and I think where we do have some things in motion that are going to require a little extra time to kind of put together, I would like to take the opportunity to recommend that we recess until the September meeting. Typically, we usually recess in July and August anyway, but I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page as far as doing it again, just because, again, with something, you know, of this magnitude, I want to make sure that we have, you know, some good data for the next meeting.
okay, so if anything comes up,
Absolutely.
we can always call a meeting, but,
So no
Motion.
July or August.
motion to recess any meetings until September.
So
Of
these-
course, if we hear any, if you need, we can be in touch.
So the September, that would be Labor Day, so September 9th would be our next.
September
scheduled
9. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, and we will reconvene in September, for September 9. Unless anything comes up, then we will,
meeting, pending anything major.
anything major. Of course, we can keep in touch with wind
Of
waste.
course, absolutely, absolutely.
And we'll be working on the air monitor. And thank you all for your attention and for coming, and we'll see you in September. It was a song like that, right?
All right,
All right.
very good.
All right, adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.